Name is Shukaguk. I work here at Sealaska Heritage as our development officer. I'm glad to welcome you to our lecture today. We're so very grateful to have Ed Thomas here with us to present on Native leadership. This year, Sealaska Heritage had a robust lecture series. Providing accessible community programming, including free lectures, is core to our mission at Sealaska Heritage. None of our work would be possible, though, without the support of donors. You can support Sealaska Heritage's public offerings during this season of giving at sealaskaheritage.org/donate. Our lecture today is presented by Ed Thomas, President Emeritus of the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. President Thomas is a distinguished leader in his own right who has dedicated himself to serving others and mentoring future leaders. His presentation will focus on the activism of Native leaders who secured human rights during the U.S. occupation of the ancient homeland of the Tlingit, Haida and Tsimshian of Southeast Alaska. There's an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation. Please, if you're on YouTube, type your questions in the chat, or if you're in the audience, I'll have a microphone. Thanks and welcome, President Thomas.
Whoops. Is that me?
It's off.
Thank you very much, David. I have two Tlingit names. One's Zahu that I got at birth, and then I was given another. Is it these two?
Yeah, we're good now.
Okay. I was given another name of Shanskadek at Ekuich, and I was given a Haida name of Skilquidance. I'm very pleased to be able to share with you some of the research I've done working with Peter Metcalf on pulling together information about some of the leadership that we had over time in our region. I call it contemporary times because it's a contemporary time when the United States took over Alaska and our people were working with them on the various issues. When I did my research and I looked at some of the profiles that were available, I found myself being very proud of the work that the people prior to my time did. And I've been very fortunate that I had the opportunity and actually honor in working with a number of these people that I've been researching and are writing about in this presentation. This presentation today will only be talking about the project itself. Will not get into any of the details of any of the profiles. That will be done in the publication and be published by Sealaska Heritage Institute in their box of knowledge, and hopefully we'll be able to get one printed also. Like I said, I had found myself being very proud of our past leaders, and when you have pride, particularly authentic pride, it really is human nature to allow us to do things better as a people and work together as a people. And what I mean by authentic pride, I mean not the selfish, false pride that people get by being boisterous or being proud of things that are more material as opposed to things that are accomplished and for the good of the people. I found this, and I'm a football fan. I'm not sure I'm a Green Bay Packer fan, but Vince Lombardi was a legendary coach of the Green Bay Packers, and he did a lot of quoting. He wrote a lot of quotes about behavior, and I found this one. It says, "When does pride begin?" That's a very important question, particularly in things like his sport. He asked the question, well, does it begin when you win a championship? Or does it begin when your team wins a game? Does it begin when you finally score as a team? Or are you proud because you're physically fit and you get to be in the National Football League? Or does it begin earlier? You know, I talked about, when I talk about pro football, I start relating a little bit to myself. And I thought back, I said, when I was involved in sports a little bit, when did I start feeling proud? I was proud in 6th grade when I got my first jersey on the basketball team. And so you can see that pride is something that you got to find the place where it starts. And when you're talking about a country and the people, you talk about yourself first, what's the pride, and then within the community. And I put down high school team because my granddaughter was involved in a volleyball from Craig, and they won state championship for their division. And that makes them very proud. When we talk about our state, Alaska being, we're very proud that it's the largest state. And we talk about our nation, national pride. We have pride in things we accomplish, and in my thinking, it comes about very often when we're doing Olympics. But what about natives? When does the pride begin in native? Of course, it goes without saying that a lot of people are very proud of their own work and accomplishments, but you're also proud of your family, your clan, the moiety, the tribe. And this being natives oftentimes generates pride. And in many cases for us in our region, at least for me, I'm very proud of our homeland. I think we have one of the richest places on the earth as far as beauty, producing wildlife and plant life, and being a national forest. When we look back a little bit when I look back a little bit into our history and some of the accomplishments of our forefathers, I find that we had not done a good job in documenting what these folks have done for us. And we don't do enough celebrating of their accomplishments. And you look into other societies, you know, when they have, like the president gives an honorary degree or honorary award to people, and you know, we have citizens of the years and all those things. And those are good things. But I think for recorded history, I really hope that working with Sealaska Heritage Institute, Tlingit and Haida, and hopefully Sealaska and others, that we will look into the future and start documenting what people are doing for the benefit of future generations. And that's what I did by pulling this together, is trying to get a start on documenting what some of our people have been doing. And when I was thinking about it, you know, some of us are pretty familiar with Myron Malott, but are you familiar with Rudolph Walton? Did you know what he did? Or Dr. Rosita Worrell, you're familiar with her and what her works are, but are you familiar with Helen Sanderson? And how about Richard Peterson? You know a lot about him, or you at least know who he is and things that he's accomplished. But do you know about Richard Stokes? So some of the things that I'm trying to accomplish here is to dig down into the history of our people and find some of those things that they're doing and share it with others. But I'm going back to our land once again, because that's where it all begins. I'm one of those that believe in the Tlingit legends, that we've always been here. This is our homeland. This is Tlingit, mostly Tlingit country from the beginning of time. And we can see that the Haida country is called down in Haida Gwaii, which used to be Queen Charlotte Islands. The Haidas migrated up and occupied the southern part of Prince of Wales Island and the islands around there. When we look back at our history, it's important to look at when non-natives really came to our land and how did they interact with our people. When our people first engaged with the non-natives from Russia, they welcomed them. They exchanged, some of the things that Russians had for some of the furs and the wealth of our region. And then Alaska was purchased by the United States in 1867 for $7.2 million. Now, our people did not know our land was for sale. And it really created a little bit of difficulty in the early times. You know, we had a hostile occupation for the first part of our coming together with under United States rule, and there were some bombardments in our communities. Angoon is one of the most famous ones, but there were some in Cake and in some of the other outlying camps. But our people pretty much figured out that settling our differences in war, it really didn't work out very well for the tribes in the lower 48. And so we really need to make sure that we deal with our differences with the United States in different ways. And we quickly realized that the United States did impose their will over our land, the homeland that we're so proud of. They did not give us citizenship like other people that even came from other countries got citizenship, but our own people did not get citizenship. And without citizenship, we could not vote, hold public office, or even own property as an individual. And probably one of the not more important, but one of the important things is the children could not attend public schools. I have a picture here of the founders of the Alaska Native Brotherhood. And the Alaska Native Brotherhood was a very important part of who we are today. A lot of folks were not familiar with the early days of the A&B and the ANS. But if you were involved during my lifetime, you would see that they were very sophisticated people. This picture that I am showing you here is what our grand camps used to look like. And you look at the men, they're all in suits, and the women are all dressed in white with their regalia. And they really took a lot of pride in being very orderly in the way they did business. Our people were very well known for Robert's Rules of Order and just plain rules of order when we had meetings. When I first got involved, every once in a while a person would get up and speak in Tlingit or in Haida, and I think might have been 1968 or maybe the year before, 65 maybe. Somebody wrote a resolution and said, we're going to speak on the floor, we're only going to speak English, so that the person that does not speak Haida doesn't have to try to interpret what the Haidas are saying, or reverse, Tlingit or even Tsimshian. So they made that as a rule, that they would make sure they conducted business on the floor in English. I'm going to talk about the ANS very briefly, because if you're involved more recently, I think there's an effort to try to bring A&B and ANS together. And when I was involved, particularly in 1968, really had a knockdown blowout convention in Cake over trying to merge A&B and ANS, because there were some people that felt very strong that ANS has been and always will be the backbone of the A&B, not joined together. Now, do I buy into that? I'm not going to give you my judgment one way or the other, because it's too sensitive for me as an outsider right now to talk about that. But there's some people that feel very strongly one way or the other about whether or not A&B and ANS should just be a single organization as opposed to ANS being the backbone. Like I mentioned, A&B and ANS were very important, and I talked a little bit about the use of your native language on the convention floor, but you got to remember that during this era, these Tlingit and Haida and Tsimshian people, English was their second language, was not their first language. They really had to go and learn not only the language, but they had to learn the laws of the United States in order to go out and debate and to try to do the things they needed to do so that we can get citizenship, we can get the right to vote, we can own property, and our kids can go to public schools, and we need to have a stronger relationship with the federal government. All those things our people did with English as their second language and learning not just the language but the laws. Many people know, but not everybody knows, that William Paul was the first Alaska Native to be elected to the Territory of Alaska legislature. And that was really important beginning, because he had run a couple of years prior, and not that he won or lost, but there was a challenge that because he was not a citizen, so to speak, that could he indeed run for office. And as it turned out, he could have even gotten citizenship under the Dawes Act, but chose not to do it because they didn't want to have to give up their the nativeness in order to be a citizen under that law. I'm going to move on a little quicker into the issues that they were dealing with at the time. And in 1929, there was a convention in Haines, and of A and B and A and S, and they took a vote. Shall we sue the federal government? It sounds like, God, that's not even debatable. They've taken our land, we should sue them. But the motion to pass that resolution passed by one vote. And the reason for that is our people had just gained citizenship in 1924, and this is 5 years later. Some of the people were concerned, well, gee whiz, are they going to, then if you sue them, are they going to take back that citizenship bill and not have a citizens? Or, probably even worse, are they going to put us all on a reservation like they did with the tribes in the lower 48? That was a big concern about our people back in that time. And so it really was important for them to talk through these kinds of things, and they ended up passing that resolution. And of course, I'll get into a little bit more about what that happened. Now, in 1935, I'll get a little bit into the Tlingit and Haida Act, but this was a policy change. They also worked to amend the Indian Reorganization Act. Fight for our homeland. Here again, this is another picture of Grand Camp, a little different. This is only A and B, and Peter Simpson there. It's important to understand that the word indigenous is very important. We have to have demonstrated that the Tlingit and Haida people were indigenous to our land. So this is our homeland, where we've been. And that's what it really came down to. If you did not have that recognition, then you really could not sue the government. As a matter of fact, the Alaska Native Brotherhood, in its first suit, tried to run it through as as A and B and A and S, suing the government, and they would be recognized as the plaintiff. And the Court of Claims said, no, you can't, because you're an organization that is not a tribe. And so that's why they went to Congress in 1935 and got the law passed for recognized Tlingit and Haida as a tribe. Oh, that guy was one. This is what I was talking about there. one of the things that's important to keep in mind, we kind of take it for granted that we have Tlingit and Haida, Central Council, and we work together very well with Tlingits and Haidas. But you got to keep in mind that Tlingit and Haida people were two distinct, separate nations under, different languages, different territory, very similar in cultural wise, but all otherwise they were separate. If you listen to the Haida language, it is more like down in the Polynesian type languages, as opposed to Tlingit being more the Athabascan dialect or the Navajo and that kind of dialect that we have. But we have common relationship to the land, water, and resources. Getting back to the federal recognition, that is what I spoke about earlier. In 1935, we got to become recognized by Congress. The Indian Reorganization Act is a very important act, particularly today, as it relates to managing government contracts. And I'll get a little bit into that a little bit later, but our people were very involved in getting the law amended for the inclusion of Alaska tribes into the Indian Reorganization Act, and that was led by the Alaska Native Brotherhood. Once the IRA Act was passed, we had two very important provisions. Section 16 is what we operate more as tribal governments under now, but IRA tribes in Alaska have the right to run businesses under Section 17. As a matter of fact, when I was working in Ketchikan, it was called the Ketchikan Indian Corporation, not community. And the reason for that is that their primary interest in organizing under the Indian Reorganization Act was to get involved in the fishing industry, either either get involved in the canning business or to have boats built for some of their citizenship so they can participate in fisheries. I already spoke about the Tlingit and Haida and the Aboriginal land, so I'll move on to the next. When we talk about the original Tlingit and Haida, they really did not think too much about being a government, so to speak. They were more interested in trying to get land suit settlement. But as time went by and the laws got amended, they got more and more involved in the governance issue. And, one of the things that was important in the Tlingit Haida Act was that you could recognize your own citizenry. And so to go out there and decide who were, they call them members, and now we call them citizens. But in those days, we really had to have active community councils in order to make sure we identified people who belonged to the Tlingit and Haida. And we moved more and more into the carrying out the social and economic issues on behalf of our people. Now, when the 1968 settlement of $7.5 million came to Tlingit and Haida, the majority of the people really did not want to settle for that. And through debates back in 1968 and 69, they had a separate group that was Tlingit and Haida that met on Wednesdays of the Grand Camp. And they debated and finally came back with a recommendation to the main body of the Grand Camp and said, we're going to accept it under somewhat of a protest. But by then, the broader Alaska Native groups start formulating the Alaska Federation of Natives, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but they decided to accept the money and then participate in trying to get some of the land, not just the monetary settlement. I'm going to shift a little bit into the governments that I talked about, managing government contracts. Many people don't know, but our region, Tlingit and Haida people, were the first to get involved in what's called the Bi-Indian contract. And what they did is they contracted for what used to be called the Southeast Agency of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Southeast Alaska was one agency. And this picture of John Borbich rather, he was the administrator at that time, or the president of Tlingit and Haida. And so they got very much involved in negotiating that contract right about the same time the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act was passed. Later, in 1975, the Public Law 93-638 was passed, and that's the Self-Determination Act. And some people may not be familiar, but during that time, there was very little done to recognize tribes in Alaska prior to that time. And so our people had to come up with who's going to be recognized as tribe in Alaska for the purposes of this act. And, look, AMB, of course, was saying, well, we'll be happy to do it for our region. But once again, the government said, no, it's got to be a tribe. And so they went and said, okay, well, let's have Tlingit and Haida. Well, before getting to that point, the federal government came up with what they called order of precedence. If you had an IRA tribe locally, then you were given the highest priority. If you did not have an IRA, then you had a traditional tribe could get involved and become the administrator or applicant and administrator of a grant or a contract under this law. To give you an example, I believe at that time Yakutat still had not been an IRA, but they did have a traditional tribe, and they went and applied and managed the BIA funding utilizing that traditional tribe. Of course, working with their village corporation as well. The third one is that if you had no IRA and no local traditional tribe, then you can use your village corporation would be recognized as the priority. And if none of the above, then the ANCSA Regional Corporation. And here in Juneau, we had a little bit of a struggle because at one point in time, even the local Tlingit and Haida said, well, we're going to get permission from Goldbelt and we're going to go ahead and manage our own contract. Well, that didn't work out because Tlingit and Haida was already there as a traditional tribe. So to overstep the second order of precedence was not going to work under the eyes of the government. So that didn't work out, and so we ended up having Tlingit and Haida being the applicant and administrator of funding for the Juneau area, except of course for Douglas. One of the things that the Indian Reorganization Act did, and our region did a good job in, I thought, was to get more and more of those administrative duties done at the local level. Now, not everybody agrees with that because if you look at Tanana Chiefs, for example, they put all their money, both from the health and from the BIA and HUD and everybody, in one organization, and work with the tribes to get resolutions, but administrated centrally. And it worked well for them. But I believe that, and as I used to be involved in Ketchikan, I believe that building the strength of the local was very important for the people's benefit. Not the organization's benefit, but the people. And so we worked with the local communities to have more and more of those duties done at the local level as opposed to regional or national level, because that was our mission all along, was to get our people to be the managers of these funds and programs, and not done by somebody from the outside the community. And by building, the strong local for managing BIA programs, it became a nucleus for bringing in more and more other programs into a community. One of the things that I found interesting after I got onto the Tlingit Haida Executive Committee was I found out that the Tlingit Haida Housing Authority was not only organized and incorporated under state law, but also federal law. One of the very few that I'm aware of, anyway, in the nation that had both state as well as federal incorporation. And I thought that originally we were a little bit over-aggressive in the housing, and had a lot of units built, and with not a lot of oversight either regionally or at local level. But throughout time, going through several administrations, they ended up pulling back together and becoming very strong and recognized nationally as one of the best housing authorities. One of the highlights of the past decade is the work that's been done by SEARCH, Southeast Alaska Regional Health Corporation. I was sharing with people I met with that I can remember when in the Sealaska building they had the corner office, and Ethel Lund was there with Frida Damas, and they had a part-time secretary, and they had the ability to hire 12 community health aides. And we're all celebrating that. That was really a big accomplishment. The two of them working very hard to get the funding for that. And you look at it now, you would not believe that that humble beginning created one of the largest contract health, regional health programs in Alaska. And done by, Ethel started, but working together with her team, they become very much a very professional group dealing with healthcare for our people in a very professional manner. Another thing that happened under Tlingit Haida was they developed a regional electrical authority, and that has been changed to what's called the Inside Passage Electrical Cooperative. Mouthful there. And originally, it went beyond these communities that are here, but gradually, over time, a lot of these communities end up doing their own electrical management. Getting back to our land, our resources, this is very important. As we're making a transition from a traditional, what I call traditional, meaning totally subsistence, we always took care of our resources as a people. We made sure that we respected the land and the waters, and made sure we took only what we needed as far as fish and game. But when we got involved in, when the exploitation part of our resources came about, our people were pretty good at making the transition because they knew fisheries. They lived the lifestyle as I talked about. They lived the subsistence, so they knew the resources. I'm going to talk a little bit down about one of our native leaders that built a cannery. Our people were pretty good boat builders. A lot of people that went to Sheldon Jackson, that's part of what they did there. They built boats out of, made sailboats and things like that. We did not really exploit the timber or the forest products very much prior to the late 50s, 60s. And then we got into that. But we always tried to maintain a balance in our environment. And, you know, we tried to make sure we'd save some for future generations. I talked a little bit about this already. You know, we knew a lot about the resources, so it was very natural when we got involved in capitalism that we went that direction through fisheries by having sailboats and trawlers and that kind of thing. I don't know if anybody here knew that Charlie Demmert, who was half native, built the first native-run cannery in Klawock. That's a picture of him up in the right-hand corner. And then his other brothers and their spouses are in a bigger picture below. Anyway, that was, you know, something to remember. I remember Charlie. I always liked to go to Kwaku up to what they called the big house. And what happened is they had this nice big house up on Kuyu Island, and he wanted it was his home. He wanted it in Klawock, so they went up, they built a raft and towed it all the way, which Kuyu Island, by the way, is up by Cake. And so they towed it all the way down to Klawock and took it up and put the big house up on a hill. And this was done before we had Caterpillar diesels and all that stuff. They had blocks, pulleys, and skids, and used logs for rollers. That's the way they did things back in those days. I thought that, you know, when I was up in that big house, how do you get that big house up there without it, you know, twisting and whatever, because it is really a big house. But that's the kind of person Charlie Demmert was. I'm going to quickly go through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. As I mentioned earlier, 1965, they joined together to go forward and trying to sue for our homelands. In 1971, it was passed. Was one of the largest settlements for Aboriginal settlements in the country at that time. Created our regional and village corporations. The shortcoming from a tribal side was all these corporations were incorporated under state law. And many of us back in the day felt it really should have been done under federal law, like under Section 17 of the IRA. Had a lot to do with, well, my thinking anyway, was it had a lot to do with taxation issues of that nature that could have been more mitigated if we were formed under federal law. But as it is, most of the corporations have done very well and have done a lot to bring us forward as a people into the capitalistic society. And so I'm proud of what has been done over time. Our culture is really who we are. And sometimes it's difficult to talk about culture because sometimes that separates us from what our normal everyday is. But I still feel our culture is who we are. I don't know who this lady is. The Sealaska Heritage Institute at that time when it was formed was foundation. And, you know, it was formed, and from my part, when I was involved in education, I thought that the education scholarships was really one of the more important things. And, but the more they got into the cultural part, the more we start seeing the value, not just in value of being there, but in value of doing some good for our people. I called it a cultural renaissance because I look up the word renaissance and I looked at what happened in France and Europe. You know, that's really how we were. We were coming back to who we were, digging deeper into who we were as a people and making sure that we did the right things relative to who we are and moving forward in an organized manner. I thought it was one of the wisest decisions Sealaska did was to formulate the Heritage Institute. If you think about the amount of contributions financially Sealaska puts forward, it's significant, but only insignificant that the Heritage Institute has been able to lever it 2, 3, and sometimes 4 times what the Sealaska Corporation contributed. So that really has become not just for the funding purposes, but for doing the kind of things that our people need to identify with who we are as a people. The education component, I see some of these programs into our schools now, and I used to be involved in Indian education in Ketchikan under the Indian Education Act, and it's not easy. And now I see more and more of our young people in the schools participating in our cultural activities, and it's there because our Heritage Institute provides that opportunity. We have a lot of things going on to preserve the stories that I never knew about, and believe very strongly that that is once again one of the highlights of who we are, is preserving some of those old stories. Now we have on the pictures here Nora, and then down below Irma Lawrence. But the Institute has gradually worked from just being focused on Tlingit and went into Haida and Tsimshian, and involved those folks into working with linguists so that they can preserve the writing of their language and the younger generations can learn. So I really am impressed with all that. Art is another important thing with what they do: carving, sewing, beading, and weaving. Back to education, you look in early times, the 2 gentlemen up on top are very involved in education. Then lower, we have those that are more intermediate times involved in education. Some of you may know Dr. Demert on the lower left-hand side. He was involved in refining the Indian Education Act way back in the early to mid 70s. He was back in Washington, D.C. working back there, and was very much involved in the Indian Self-Determination Act component that deals with education back then. And of course, when you look back at some of the lawsuits to get us started on our rights, in Sitka, I talked a little bit about Rudolph Walton. He chose to sue the Sitka School District because they were not allowing natives into the school way back then. And this is before the Alaska Native Brotherhood was organized. It's back in about 1909, 1910, thereabouts. Peter probably correct me if I'm making a mistake, but it was back then, and that was part of the thing that stimulated the Alaska Native Brotherhood to be formed, because those kinds of discriminatory actions were pretty common amongst our people, or with our people. And then William Paul got involved in suing in Ketchikan a little bit later, but still involved in a lawsuit that ended up winning and getting our people into the public schools and shutting down the Indian school in Ketchikan. When I put this picture, that's Clarence Jackson, did it somehow not quite fit that he's not the dancer or is not in the schools, but you think back on Clarence, he was a guiding light in one of the very first to be a moderator at the celebration. Very involved in sharing stories and making sure that our songs are done correctly and people are learning them the correct way. And so, you know, I really felt that no matter what, this picture, Clarence, fits for me. This picture that you see there, he's introducing the President of the United States. That's not my logo there, that's Obama logo. Anyway, we were very proud of him. He was selected on a national level to go up there and introduce and say the prayer prior to President Obama speaking. I really need to say once again that when you look at the profiles, once this is all done, you're going to see the leadership qualities in the people that are highlighted. And they're involved in the clan, they're involved in the tribal community, whether it be the region or state, or even a national level. I'm going to go into one of the myths that still plague us today. One of the things that is said by non-Native groups is, gosh, Native Americans, all you got to do is ask Uncle Sam and you pretty much get what you want. But a study done in the year 2000, 2003 proved that to be wrong. If you look at the one that keeps going up, that's a per capita spending for non-natives. The bottom lines are red. While we're in the early part of this prior to 1982, we were doing pretty good with Uncle Sam. But after that, it's been pretty low. The disparity is getting wider and wider. Now, some of that is as a result of things that happen in the non-Native community, but on the other hand, there's a lot of that is just not getting the fair shake when it comes to federal contributions to our people. And a lot of that had to do with people on the congressional side trying to deal with budget disparities. We had tax break to the wealthy. I like this chart, and if you can guess what department the Native Americans are in, you don't need to guess very much. It's the smallest sliver down there, Department of Interior, and we're a sliver of that. And if you look at what the tax breaks did back in, what year was that, 2003. Those are under the Bush 2 tax breaks. And we're doing that again now. We're doing the same thing. We're giving tax breaks to corporations and the 1% wealthy. I don't know if you know much about managing federal contracts, but under the law, where tribes are supposed to get, like other contractors get, they take care of your administrative costs, and you don't have to go in debt. Well, they didn't do that for tribes. A corporation would never allow that to happen to them, a non-Native corporation. They would not accept 80% of what it takes them to administer that contract. But we had to do that for more than 3 decades. But our people were there on the national level. We had Jackie Johnson there on the national level, statewide level. We had Janie Leask in the AFN, regional level, Richard Peterson. Then down at the local level, I have Ivan Gamble, and that's Andy Hope and Richard Stoke. But those are just a few. I use those as examples of our people were there and made a difference in making sure that we end up getting a fair shake once the dust settled in managing government contracts. One thing that I'm proud of, and you see Dr. Sobolev there, is he met with a number of elders, and they came up with making a list of the values of our people. And I think we have some of that published in some of our organizations. And And this is only part of the list here. And then he went into what we called our way of life. I tried to get my wife to do the obedience part, but that's not working very well. Anyway, we need to respect ourselves, our elders, and others. Respect, we really have a proud history of when we disagree and we are fighting with one another, we have that level of respect we can go back on because we respect one another. I can remember one time we had a meeting here in Juneau of the Sealaska board, Sealaska shareholders, and it was pretty much out there that some of the shareholders were going to go up and let the board know what they thought of them. They're all going to line up at the microphone and let them have it. And so the chairwoman at the time said, we should just have Walter Soboleff say a few words to them. And so it was agreed. He was going to do the prayer anyway. And what he said, when you get up there and you're going to speak strong. You're not going to go out there and embarrass yourself and your family. When you speak, you're speaking on behalf of your family. And when you're speaking against somebody on the other side, the opposite clan, that's your father's people. You can't insult your father's people. And so when, excuse me, when he got done, people lined up, they spoke strong. They did not point fingers at one another. I thought that was so much a part of showing respect in a proper way that our elders pass on to us. And you got humor here too. Hold each other up is really one of the things that is very important in our culture. I think through organizations, when we start getting away from our homeland, our home communities, we used to all have our own camps and whatever, then they consolidated in communities. Then community people went out into the cities. Our clans got scattered, our families got scattered, and we really needed to rely more on organizations instead of the clan structure, and in many ways that weakened who we were. So it's really important that people like Dr. Soboleff worked us through some of these, saying this is our way of life. We need to listen to one another. We need to be strong stewards of our land. We need to live in peace and harmony with one another, but still be strong. I'm going to conclude here in a minute. I wanted to give you a brief overview of what is going to be in the final production of the President Emeritus Hall of Fame. We're going to have the introduction, which is going to talk about what you saw in the advertisement of this lecture today. Most of that will be in there. We'll have acknowledgments of those who contributed. Of course, Sealaska Heritage Institute and Tlingit Haida Central Council and Peter. And then we'll have the profiles. We have 52 of them right now. And we were supposed to just do 50, and we're going to work with the supporters of our thing, see if we can expand it a little bit. Then I have what I'm calling a chronological history. And what I felt was important is to have all the important events and laws that were passed that impacted us as a people within our region, so that you can relate, whether it's the Citizenship Act, the Tlingit Haida Act, or the land claim settlement, all those things, put them in order, and then you can relate to the profile that you're reading about. You can relate to the time when they were involved. And back to good old Vince. Stand up and cheer for the doers, the achievers, the ones who recognized the challenge and did something about it. I thought that was a pretty good statement, and I still feel that we as a people have not taken the time to celebrate our doers, our people who did something about our problems, did something to bring us forth as a people so that we can enjoy what we're enjoying today. And there's so many of them that have done so much for us. And this other quote about we're not going to be perfect about it, but you can bring about excellence by trying. And I thought that was a very important point to make. One thing you're going to find if you get a chance to look at the product when it's done is some people are getting left out. And some of them because there's not enough information about them. Some of them because they're still doing great things right now. And hopefully they will be written about in their entirety as their time goes through. And, you know, some of them I just never worked with them. I was so very lucky that I got involved in the Alaska Native Brotherhood as a junior A&B member in 1952. And then I took a break and didn't come back until I think it was the Heidelberg Convention. It was either 1964, I believe, or 63 or 64, I'm not sure. That's when I was first elected as a delegate to A&B. But I was so fortunate because people like William Paul was still involved, people like Roy Pradovich, Frank Pradovich, other folks that maybe you really never heard about, Victor Haldane. Those folks were still involved in running the Alaska Native Brotherhood and Sisterhood. And I was so very fortunate to have worked with them. But we have future generations need to hear about some of these folks that are still doing great things. I'm not going to take time to list a few, but I was meeting with Rosita talking about a few of them that are not on the list, but gosh, we need to really find their families and help contribute to some of this stuff. And I'm not going to say I'm apologizing for leaving some out, but I really want to encourage families that if you know more about some of our leaders that are not on the list, contact and work with us going into the future, or work with the various organizations, whether it's Tlingit Haida, Heritage Institute, or Sealaska, because we really, I think, do ourselves an injustice by not celebrating those who are the doers, those that do the best they can for us. I think it's important for us to know what our ancestors did. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Any questions? Good.
Is to, on the premise of getting the Alaska Natives to cast their vote together, and I work with a lot of leaders in answering this question, and it is extraordinarily difficult to answer and implement, put forward. How come we control the governor's seat and the House and the Senate and City Hall for the benefit of everyone? And I was wondering what your thoughts were on how to achieve that someday.
Could you repeat that for me? Just a question.
How do we achieve the Native vote together? Because we control 17.9% of the voting bloc in Alaska, which is enough to take the governor's seat, or the House, or the Senate, or City Hall. How do we do that? Do you have any suggestions?
I believe very strongly that it really begins at the family and local level. You know, one of the problems that I have witnessed over time, I've lived here in Juneau for almost 30 years, is that one year we had, I think, 17% turnout in the state election. I said, gee whiz, we can do better than that. Then we had a Tlingit and Haida election, we had 20% of our native people showed for that. And I really, then in that same year, in Angoon, they had almost 80% turnout for their state election. And so, we have complacency in pockets around who we are. On top of that, we don't agree with one another. And on the other hand, I think that when it comes to things like what happened with Mary Peltola, that's an example when somebody has a good message and people rise up and say, God, this is a good opportunity, let's get out and vote. That really makes a difference. And I felt for a long time that we have had excellent candidates, but a lot of complacency. And I think that when we look at things like Sealaska elections, this last time, what did we get? Almost 60%? That should be on all of our elections, in my opinion, should get 70%. But anyway, I think it's person to person saying, these are important things. When you look back prior to 1924, our people could not even vote, could not hold property. Send that message on to your kids and grandkids, that this is something our people fought for years and years so that we can have a voice. And so don't just let your voice die in the wind. Anyway, that's my opinion. I don't know that organizations can do much other than to just encourage people to get out and vote, register and get out and vote.
This on? Can you hear me?
Tap the end, see what's going. Squeezing it too hard.
I really appreciate it, and thank you for speaking to us today. What I was really wanting to say is that, as you were talking about the different organizations, our Alaska Native Brotherhood and our Alaska Native Sisterhood, the membership has gone down tremendously, as you watched and seen when you and I basically, I was in the Petersburg A&B when all the old-timers were there, and their place was just jam-packed, with the people. And I think what you have presented here today is something that we as the A&B Sisterhood and Brotherhood could use to show the young people, what they did before and what they can do today. I think with a lot of times right now, they do not feel like they can make an impact. But the impact is by the joining of the group. Of course, that force is pretty strong once you get together. And if we could utilize that, your speech there, as a way to get younger people to understand where we were before and how far we've gained. Because you really pointed out some things that gives a lot of young people thought, especially having gone through the education that, that Sealaska and they developed over the years. That's real important, and I really want to say thank you to you.
Yeah, I think it's, when you look back during my era of involvement in A&B, we had what's called junior A&B and A&S. That's where I first got involved. And they were invited not just to conventions, but on the local level. You're going to come and you're going to serve coffee. You're going to come and, you're going to have some cake with us. You're going to be part of the social part. And I think that's missing. That's just one component. And the other part, and please excuse me, I haven't been at a lot of conventions lately, but I noticed that executive committee members don't come to conventions sometimes. They really need to be, if you're going to run for president, you made a pledge. Get to that convention. You're an executive committee member, you got to be there. That's what leadership's about. And now, like I said, you can excuse me, but I was involved in A&B many years. I used to be first vice president. And by God, our people showed up to the meetings and we participated. And did we always agree? No. Did we get bored? Sometimes. And sometimes we did good things. But, you know, when you look back at the people prior to my time, they were there working hard, and things didn't go right. They write a resolution and do things different. And I think that's what's needed again. Any other questions?
Thank you, Ed. I don't have a question, but I want to make some comments. And, well, first of all, thank you. I mean, I really learned a lot. And I think, you know, I think definitely we'll be using this, you know, for our curriculum, for teaching, you know, integrating this kind of history into our schools. I mean, we need this kind of information. And I think you also, what I wanted to say is I think you provided the context for the profiles.
Right.
And I think that's really critical, you know, and more than likely we'll be missing some. And I was just thinking, oh, I wonder if I nominated my mom. My mom, I mean, she was a salmon cannery union organizer, and she went on strike and, you know, fought for equal wages. But the point is that probably there are others. And if there are others, I heard you say, submit their names, submit the biography of those people, because, you know, we live in a big country. We have a lot of our people who really worked hard. But I think it's incumbent on those individuals who know about others, you know, to bring forth their biography and let us know, because I don't think there's any intent to exclude anyone. So I do appreciate, you know, that you've provided the context. And I have to say, a lot of the history about tribes I didn't know. And I think it's really, I'd like to invite you back just to talk about tribes, the internal workings of tribes, because I'm sure that a lot of people don't know, you know, exactly, you know, all of the things that, especially, you know, the leadership that has come from Southeast Alaska. Amending the IRA Act was a significant thing, and that came from our people in the A and B. And one of the things I remember is that William Paul, under the IRA Act, as amended, he proposed that we form regional corporations. That concept was present, you know, long before ANCSA came about. So I'm really grateful, you know, that you've brought a lot of this history forward, and that you've provided the context for the selection or identification of the profiles, you know, that you're going to have there. And I think this is probably the first time that I know of, you know, that anyone has done this in the Alaska Native community and maybe in the Native American community. And then I also noticed that you didn't even profile all the things that you have done, you know, beginning with Indian education. We used to call him Indian Ed. Because he was first a teacher, and then when he was working at KIC, Ketchikan Indian Community, he was working on education program, and that's where he got his name, Indian Ed. And then coming into Tlingit and Haida, and then all of the things that Tlingit, I mean, first of all, getting recognized as a tribe. I mean, I think we had to do it twice. I mean, it seems like, you know, I think what you've demonstrated is the progress that we've made has been in the political realm and in amending or creating new legislation. And but then, as my dear clan brother over there points out, is we need to get out the vote. We need our people to get out the vote. We elected Mary Peltola, but I'm going to tell you, if we looked at statistics, we're not going to be proud, because we didn't vote. We didn't get out the Native vote in the same way that we should have, you know. But fortunately, she was elected. And I know that we did initiate a lot of efforts to get out the vote. But when we come and look at the statistics, I'm afraid that we're going to be a little bit embarrassed about ourselves. But I want to thank you, Ed, for your decades of leadership. Decades of leadership at your clan level. I mean, I was so proud of Ed that he, you know, his clan they sponsored a totem pole raising from a clan. And that's new. We haven't been doing that as clans. And Ed brought that down to Klawock, where I'm afraid our culture, was really suppressed. And right now I know there's that revitalization effort going on. But Ed did that as a clan member, not as a Sealaska director, not as president of Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian. So Ed, I just want to add my personal, and I'm sure everyone here agrees with me, that you have provided us decades of leadership. But I don't want to say, last time when I was praising him, he said, oh, she thinks she's writing my obituary or something. And I said, no, you've got lots more to do, but I do want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was the head of the Indian education program in Ketchikan. They called me Indian Ed, and now my wife calls me Special Ed. Times change.
How are we ever going to live up to you?
I don't know. I guess, but for a while there, they called me Physical Ed, but I'm way past that now. Well, once again, I want to thank you, and then Rosita, I appreciate this opportunity to share this project with your audience. I really, we watch these series on the computer, and I'm not sure how many people you have now, but boy, it's a good way to get the word out and to get people who are not here in Juneau an opportunity to see what's happening. I really appreciate that. And, a little earlier before I leave here, I was up there working on some amendments I did to the presentation. And pretty soon I hear a bunch of kids singing Tlingit songs, and they're out doing their thing out here, and I really was impressed by that. I felt so good in my heart that, God, they're bringing school kids right here now today while I'm here. And it made me think of a story. When I first got elected president of Tlingit and Haida, ANS was having convention in Huna. And I had to stay way out at the lodge, so it took me time to get in. And they were still doing their morning songs and prayers when I walked in the door. But the song that they were singing was, "How Great Thou Art." And I told them, I thought they were singing about me. But they weren't. That's a joke. I'm getting like John Hope now, I have to tell you that's a joke. I was sharing with Peter one of the stories by Bob Kogo, who was from Craig, but he was a Haida, and him and his friend Frank were learning English together. The Haida was their main language, but they were learning English together, and his friend Frank really was proud of the fact that he learned all the big words before the other people in the community. And one day, Bob asked Frank, "How do you feel today, Frank?" Frank says, "Oh, I feel delicious." Anyway, I feel delicious, so thank you very much for being here. Thanks for your question.
Oh, thank you for all of your support over the years.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you really were a true special